you know.
I think we're ready to go.
Beautiful.
Dr. Brown, her and I will both be in here to help moderate as well. So if anyone has any issues, we can assist, but the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And you know what? You will be my participants. Thank you for being here and giving me this opportunity. After yesterday, I had to do something, right? And thanks to Dr. Mendez for really pushing me. I am grateful for the camaraderie that we have and the sort of support that we give to each other. And so we come to creating equity excellence for learners via the remote learning session. I want you to know that everything that occurred here in this presentation had to do with that setting. It was that COVID time. It was the students having to battle with face-to-face and online and meeting the needs of the less, as they call them, the struggling students in math. And so I was fortunate enough to have a class with these students, and we were looking at equity and excellence in the math classroom and how we can do what we can do as teachers. So it came up with, let's look at effective math practices, and they call them best math practices. And they looked at an article, and from there, from there, they came up with the idea that you can select one or two strategies, you can work them in your classroom, and you can come back to us and share with us your findings and give us ideas of what we can do. And that way it helps me to build my instruction for the course also. So we had these students, they had to identify a strategy, and the focus question was on what was the effective strategy. Now, with everything, I want you to know that we had our biases. There was something that were inbuilt, and as I talk about it, we want to be transparent in whatever we do. Okay, yes, we want it to be accessible. You see the I there? The I, we want to be transparent at all time because we never know who is looking at what we are modeling. So we say here that we want the classroom to be successful. So we need to provide environment for students to flourish, right? Teachers want something that's easy to adopt and simple to use. These are the students' words, by the way. Okay, it was a class of 8 students, and these are some of the things that they had to say. One of the things that I looked at is a place where students create their own understanding of math rather than being spoon-fed ideas. And this student strongly felt that we need to veer away from that. If we're going to make it more accessible to all students, we need to do something different than spoon feeding them. And here they were at a time when the students, some didn't have access to devices, some weren't able to have the help that they needed from the home. And the parents were, the teachers were trying in their classroom. By the way, these are in-service teachers in the math program, the graduate program. And they themselves were having a hard time meeting the needs of these struggling students. So it says that the teacher's role is simply to act as an intermediary on the journey of self-discovery in the classroom. I think it's more than that, given the challenges, right? Given the challenges that we are faced with, and now that we are back in the classroom, we see that the nurturing part, that will always be there. And we can't get away from that. So that's something we had to look at. Whatever we find here, this is what I'm going to build on in my class for further discussion, to lift it, to see where do we go next. So the instructional process, we recognize it as being a social act, wherein the struggling students interact with their peers and teachers. And I think based on that, some decided that they're going to use peer instruction, because they said it's a reciprocal nature. So let's include that. And then we looked at equity and excellence as being the hallmark of our discussion. Then it should also be part of our delivery. And in whatever we do, we should focus on meeting the needs of every student. When we say no student left behind, it shouldn't be only at the lunch line, but we want this whole thing, okay? So we're pushing for it. And so, as I mentioned before, there were some things that really hit us as we were discussing, and they talk about accessibility. And that was a big thing for them because they themselves were struggling to ensure that the students had the material, that they could talk to the parents, that they can speak to Johnny or Joanne and say, let me see your work. Show me what you're doing right now, you know, and then they work with them one-on-one. Flexibility, again, that came in, we saw the need to shift. We had to shift, and with that came the need to wear different hats. Everything had to be transparent because they wanted to be able to provide like a model for their colleagues. So that was part of it. And the whole thing was being proactive, not just reacting to things, but being proactive, preparing for the future. Okay, so the question was, okay, so we were pushed to do remote learning, but at what cost to our neediest students? At what cost to these students? And so these students, these in-service teachers of mine, they had to answer that question. And the way how they answer that question is to look at the effective strategies that were out there and see how effective they really were and talk about these strategies. Okay, and this was done over a 4 weeks period, and they looked at those questions that triggered this activity. Okay, so we're going to look at some the best practices that they had and some of their responses. Sorry, if I'm going too fast, stop me, please. So they were concerned about, there were 3 questions. You must, when doing this, look at what behaviors you're seeing your students displaying. What about your role as the teacher in facilitating the students' learning? And based on that role, what are those behaviors you see being displayed by you as the teacher in that classroom? Those are things that they had to look at. And these questions were answered in their discussion chat. So luckily for me, I can go and pull information. So they looked at it as being, when we talk about effective best math practices, we're looking at what did we use in the classroom to meet the needs of these struggling students, and they consider that as being effective. Everybody agreed that systematic, explicit instruction was the best thing to do. They all said that we're doing it and it worked for us. Well, then, since it's working for you, what next? What can you do to level the playing field for all students so that each student was receiving exactly what they really needed, okay, to succeed? So here they had, they talked about, oh, we structure it and we dole it out little by little and whatever. And then I said, so what about one-to-one instruction? Would that come in under this? Don't you think it might be possible that when you're talking about that, well, if we stretch it, yes, we can get it. I said, but even in modeling should be a part of that. If you look at explicit and systematic, it's the way how the two of them coming together, the explicit part. And I said, just think about it. Just about everything you have here as you identify as your best practices should come under that. But they mainly saw visual representation and things like using anchor charts, storytelling, and there was another one, posters. they saw those as being under this systematic explicit instruction because you wanted to bring about a change. However, there are some who focus on the one-to-one. Others look at modeling. You had self-instruction and peer tutoring. And I'm going to jump the gun a bit, but I'm going to tell you that the discussions were very enlightening. And I have different things that I put aside on the discussion, but I have them on another PowerPoint, right? But when you look at it, no one immediately thought that peer tutoring would be positive for these students. They felt that, why do we want to do peer tutoring with these students who need the one-on-one? Because they're struggling. And then the voice of one of their peers came in to say, here is an example. I am telling you that this is what happened in my classroom with the student. He said, imagine I finished teaching and they're struggling with it. And I saw one young lady went over to help the other. And I listened in, and she didn't tell her anything different to what I said. But the student understood it then, but didn't understand what I was saying. So that's when he gave kudos to the power of peer tutoring, and people were able to shift in their thinking, maybe I should try peer tutoring. So that was one of the things that came out there. Let's see what else we had. Okay, so we go with explicit, and this is the same thing I was telling you how it is structured. And something that we need to know is that although all students can benefit from explicit symptomatic instruction, students with disabilities and difficulties, they often require it. They need the structure. They need to have that. And so I guess most of them were saying, but this is what we do. But it is in the delivery part of that explicit and systematic instruction that I'm seeing, wherein we need to put little things in, whether it is, as someone say, a cue to get their attention, or a cue to say we are transitioning from concrete, to semi-concrete, to abstract, whether we want to have some advanced cues. If we want to have those alerts, then we need to get them embedded in there, because at the forefront is that these students are struggling and we need to meet them wherever they are to build them to where we want them to be, or to where the curriculum indicates that they should be. So under this, they look at their visual representation. And they said this was very good for them because there are so many things that they can use in the classroom and that they use. One was talking about teaching fraction and teaching the fraction one way, but when they start using models and they start having the fraction chart and they use the paper plate and did the fractions, they said the students were able to conceptualize it much better. I know of one engagement, and this is the acting out. One student suggested that you can use acting out. And under that, I see wherein the acting out came in as modeling. And I told them, why not think of this as modeling? So I think when I come to modeling, I'll present that other scenario. The one-on-one learning. It was most beneficial because it helps students become organized problem solvers. It broke down the steps into more manageable steps. Again, it comes under the same thing with explicit, and systematic, but it is in the one-to-one delivery. So I think might be the way in which it's delivered that is questionable here as to whether we should really just section these, but it was seen as one of the advantages. And yes, they talk about the anchor chart. And an anchor chart may be just identifying words. The Q1 could be more, less, fewer, things like that you can have coming in. But I think here what the student brought out is that you don't design the anchor chart yourself, but you incorporate the students' help. Let them be the owners of the learning too. And you show them that math is manageable. Math can be done. Anyone can do it. So you get them to come in and to assist here. And you're showing them that you value their contribution. And once you start affirming the needs of these struggling students, little by little, they'll get to appreciate math. And you can probably sing your song, math is real, real, real. Math is real to me. I like it because it always makes me feel math can go into everything. That is why I love it so. Math is so real to me. So you have these different things that we can reach them with. And then came the self-instruction. And you notice the first thing, the challenges. They didn't even give me the good ones first, right? They just tell me right away, it's time consuming, self-instruction. We have to plan all of these. We have to allow students to self-pace. You have to think about time management. And would students be honest about their understanding? Again, we want that transparency. If we model the desired behavior, we expect it, right? If we set up a learning environment where trust is there, we expect that the children can tell us, well, I partially understand, or I didn't get it at all, and be able to show you somewhere. So pacing themselves. Okay. And then, but someone said self-instruction, oh yes, they got that from Steely, allows them to develop the self-regulation skills. And they said, this is what will help them build their confidence in math. We know that we tell our students that, if you can self-regulate and you can know where you're making your mistakes, you can develop those metacognitive skills, etc., etc. And so here they were seeing it for themselves and they were the ones talking about it. Peer tutoring, they look at the advantages and then the difficulties, right? Modeling the behavior, whether you have people piggybacking off of others, whatever is happening here, they had that coming in. All right. And then they talk about some of the feedback. So some of the feedback that was provided. Now, remember I talked to you about the modeling part that I wanted to present, right? And we have it wherein, for example, the students were struggling with the idea of factors, factorial theorem, but I'm saying to them that it can be done in different ways and it can reach the student at different level. For example, the question says that was posed, 5 students met at a park. They each shook the other's hand. How many handshakes were there all together? Let's break that apart. Let's see what the students know and can do, and then see what sort of strategies we can use. And one of the strategies that came out during that time was the acting it out. And the student said that he preferred to get them to act it out so that for those students, they can actually do the handshake and that they can correct it. So for me, I tried to come in a little bit and I said, so what about getting them to talk about it first and make conjecture as to how many possible handshakes you think? And then after doing it, you can now go back to discussing why that answer was different. And then you try another way, which was the modeling, which they use the table chart. Okay, so that came out there. All right. And so we had, let me go back here and see if I had anything. Yes. So it was changing the mindset. Oh, and here we see what one student said. I think I will have to work the hardest to incorporate visual representation. And this is one of my in-service teachers. And he was saying why. He said, like many of my students, I like the quickness of working abstractly and find myself often using those strategies. And he's being honest. He's getting some sort of transparency here so that others can see what is happening and that he's not setting himself up as any judge against them not being able to do it. And so he talked about this, that I also have trouble finding the balance of transitioning students from visual to more abstract. For me, I say it requires teaching students to respond to the attention signal. That's when you're using those few things. That's when you want to make the switch. The next thing is we got to be patient. We got to get them to practice because we're dealing with struggling students. And along with that, we need to affirm their success. Whatever we do, we have to help students to be a part of what we're doing. And so we have the chocolate algebra there. That's one of the things that students are involved in. And my concluding thoughts, students require our help and support, and we can do so by providing the right environment. We also need to know that practice of these strategies, of these desired behaviors will help them to reinforce those behaviors, desired behaviors, but we need to give them the opportunity to say, how did this work for them? And to give them the time to show that they can do it, right? We will provide them with these different strategies, these different ways of doing things or ways of knowing, and then we help them to develop confidence and self-esteem and need for future success to make each and every one of them a winner. The focus is on equity, meeting them where they are and helping them to get to where we want them to be, but working with the individual student. I think that might be it. Yes. Thank you very much indeed. And I can stop sharing now.
Thank you, Dr. Trotman. That was excellent.
Thank you. As usual, I see Deborah. So let's go. Any question? Let me see what I can